Trump today has the Republican Party in a vice, the likes of which they haven't experienced since Charlottesville. And before that, in the aftermath of the Access Hollywood tape, Republicans who have hardly been profiles in courage today found just over a dozen of their members break ranks and slowly, timidly begin to call out Donald Trump's flagrant, bellicose, racist attacks against 4 female members of Congress. We've made a decision on this show not to amplify Trump's attacks by showing them or even reading them here, but it should surprise no one that they're false and that they serve as ugly reminders of Donald Trump's xenophobia, misogyny, and racism. Don't take our word for it, though. Here is the one, the brave, the likely now endangered Republican who spoke out on camera.
I think those tweets are racist and xenophobic. They're also inaccurate, right? The 4 women he's referring to are actually citizens of the United States. 3 of the 4 were born here. It's also behavior that's unbecoming of the leader of the free world. You should be talking about things that unite us, not divides us.
To be clear, there is one Republican who said that today. If any other do this hour, we'll bring it right to you. About a dozen others have tweeted their objection, though. But as of this hour, the rarely camera-shy species of members of Congress have been MIA from our camera locations. We reached out to top GOP leaders in the House to invite them on this show today. Guess what? We didn't hear back. And while it's not news that the president is a racist or that the Republican Party is largely following his lead, what should serve as a warning to all Democrats is that this is the terrain on which the 2020 election will be waged. New York Times' Peter Baker writes it this way, quote, President Trump woke up Sunday morning, gazed out at the nation he leads, saw the dry kindling of race relations, and decided to throw a match on it. It was not the first time, nor is it likely to be the last. He has a pretty large carton of matches and a ready supply of kerosene. And anyone who doubts that this is central to Trump's re-election strategy missed the Trump summit with his purveyors of fake news and baseless smears. Last week, he praised the social media provocateurs who spread disinformation meant to sow racial divisions. Baker adds this, quote, heading into next year's election, he appears to be drawing a deep line between the white, native-born America of his memory and the ethnically diverse, increasingly foreign-born country he's presiding over, challenging voters in 2020 to declare which side of that line they're on. And that is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends, and a new friend from the Washington Post, senior political reporter Aaron Blake. With us on set, Associated Press White House reporter Jonathan Lemire, former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton University, Eddie Glaude, and Tim Alberta is with us. He's the chief political correspondent for Politico magazine, author of an unbelievable new book, American Carnage, on the front lines of the Republican Civil War, which we're going to dive into more later in the hour. But I want to start with you. You, at this moment, are the authority on the Republican Party. Does anything about today surprise you?
No, not really. And actually, I would start with Will Hurd, because if I had to go to Las Vegas and bet my kids' college funds on the first Republican who would come out and make a statement like that, it would be Will Hurd. This is a guy who, a black Republican representing a majority Hispanic district on the southern border, the only Republican left representing any border, and he actually has the most of it, 820 miles, all the way from San Antonio to El Paso. Not coincidentally, back during the government shutdown, which was over the border crisis, President Trump met with an awful lot of congressional Republicans day in and day out at the White House. Will Hurd never got a call from the White House. So Will Hurd survived by fewer than 1,000 votes in 2018, despite being 25 points above water, fave on fave, in his district. That's how bad the president's numbers were there. It's very difficult to see him surviving another election cycle in these conditions. So that part doesn't surprise me. The rest of the radio silence from the Republican Party also does not surprise me. Political self-preservation is the name of the game, and if you cross Trump, as we've seen with Jeff Flake, Mark Sanford, Bob Corker, Justin Amash, go down the line, you're not long for this world.
Eddie Glaude, I agree with all of that. That political analysis is spot on. That is our moment. But I have a little bit of a flip in my stomach. not pausing and talking about what that means. That means the Republican Party now enthusiastically, in the light of day, it's a Dayside program, embraces racism and xenophobia.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Peter Baker piece that you opened up with is that Peter also mentions the way in which race has been used by the Republican Party and even the Democrats over the course of my political lifetime, right? So talking about the dog whistles of Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, Bush's Willie Horton, all of this stuff has been a part, Bill Clinton's Sister Soldier moment, all of this stuff has been a part of our politics. But he says Trump has taken it, right, from dog whistle to foghorn. That now it's just blatant, it's a blatant appeal. And that blatant appeal makes sense in the context of the anxiety and anguish around the demographic shifts that are evident in our society. This country's changing, and it's being felt in the intimate spaces of our lives. And so you see Donald Trump appealing to those anxieties, those hatreds, those fears, and making political hay of it. But I want to say this. What's interesting is that if this is the battlefield we're going to play on, the Democrats are going to have to make a decision. They're going to have to make a decision whether or not they're going to triangulate. They're going to have to make a decision whether or not they're going to dog whistle, whether or not they're going to try to be Republican light and appeal to the Trump voter and, you know, the Rust Belt, all of the stuff that, to my ear, sounds like dog whistle, right? That I've been a part of since not only the DLC and Bill Clinton, but before that and Gary Hart, and now we hear a version of it. It's the third way. All of this stuff is a part of this mixture. So it's easy, and I know Tim will say a lot more about this later, it's easy for us to identify Donald Trump as the exceptional villain and not see that he's a reflection of what we've been doing in our politics for decades, Nicole.
But let me press you, why can't it be the majority that isn't raising their child to look at someone with brown or black skin and say they weren't born here and demonize them? Why can't one party, the better party, the Democratic Party, flip the script and make that the majority, make that more popular with the majority of black, white, male, female, old, young voters? This
is what we have to do. This is our opportunity. We're at an inflection point. We're in a cold civil war, to echo Steve Schmidt from a long time ago. We're in a cold civil war. People have to choose sides. Yes, we have to choose sides. Can't play games. You got to be courageous. Who the hell is Donald Trump to tell me that I have to leave? That he has to tell to leave. She can leave. I mean, I hear this all the time. You can leave if you don't like it. Folks used to hear this in the context of the Vietnam War. Folks hear it all the time. If you don't like it, you can leave because they think it doesn't belong to us, that the country's not ours. Right? So the Democrats have to show spine. They have to actually believe, Nicole, in the world that you're describing. They actually have to believe that we can fundamentally become a multiracial democracy. They have to stop lying, just like the Republicans. They have to stop believing in the lie and then confront the ugliness of who we are. I probably won't say anything else on the show. But we have to understand.
Don't threaten me with that.
We have to understand, Nicole, that this is not melodrama. This isn't All My Children.
No, I agree with you.
This isn't about identifiable villains. What Donald Trump is, what he's doing, it's all of our faults.
But wait, I want to get to all of you, but you cracked my brain open. And what do we tell our babies?
Right? That's a good question. Because the babies are, whenever, as James Baldwin would say, whenever the babies are concerned, you don't have time for tears. Because you got to raise them. You got to make sure that they can grow up without this stuff taking root in their soul. Hopefully we can give them license to imagine themselves otherwise. To tell him that man who's the president of the United States is everything that we do not stand for.
Well, can I add something?
Please.
We talk about politics in terms of coalitions all the time. And while we may focus on Trump's commentary mobilizing and galvanizing his base, which he is obsessed with. You talk to anybody around the president, he constantly talks about the base, the base, the base. How do we fire these people up? How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them mobilized? It is really important to understand that if you look at all the survey data, all of the exit polling, all the micro-targeting figures that we have at our disposal, there are a lot of folks who voted for the president in 2016 who voted Democrat in 2018. And by and large, they are living in the suburbs. They are upscale, wealthy, traditionally Republican voters who, on these cultural issues that we've been talking so much about, they are beginning to take a step away from this Republican Party. And so for all the talk of how this can help the president doesn't engage that core base of voters that he has, he's not going to be able to win re-election without that broader coalition, including a lot of these suburbanites who were not going to pull the lever for Hillary Clinton, and they cared about tax cuts, they cared about the Supreme Court, they cared about Obamacare, but when they see things like this, there's this old adage about how, when Mitt Romney or John McCain would go to address the NAACP in 08 or in 12, and people would say, why are they going to address the NAACP? And their campaign strategists would say, it's not because they think they're going to win over black voters. It's because they want to win more white suburbanites. And I think that's worth keeping in mind in the context of this.
So here's where it is for Democrats, and let's really be clear, I'm not usually the silver lining person, but here's my silver lining.
No, I need it. Give me some silver lining.
Coming out of last week, we were at the beginning of the week talking about the census and the citizenship question. Democrats doubled down on that to call out the president for exactly why he was pursuing the citizenship question, that it was all about race and it was all about demographics. Then you get to the end of the week and we're talking about the fighting that's going on between Democrats. Well, thank you, Donald Trump, because you have just unified the Democratic Party that understands that you're the party of that 35% who may or may not be or, identify with you as a racist, and the rest of us. And here's where Democrats' strength is in their diversity, in their numbers, in the women. And I think that that's the winning message going into 2020.
Make no mistake. I mean, this is the play from this White House. The president, as Tim said, it's about the base. It's about fighting this election on the same terms as the last election. That they think they can echo these things, whether it's dog whistles or foghorns. That they can sound these notes, and that they will energize people to come out and turn out for this president again. This is a fight that he wants. Last week, the discussion of the four women, the so-called squad, if you will, these congresswomen of color, dominated Tucker Carlson's show on Fox News at night. The president last Friday in the South Lawn teased this sort of attack a little bit, suggesting that he sort of stepped in and tried to defend Speaker Pelosi, saying that she should be treated better than these women, and mentioned a few of them by name. And over the weekend, we know because our reporting, he was sort of pleased that he had sort of meddled in that. He had stirred the pot a little bit. And then Sunday morning, another Fox segment about the Netroots summit the night before with these women appeared. He saw that. 20 minutes later, the tweet came out. After that, a few minutes after that, he stepped out of the White House, into the motorcade, went to Virginia to golf. And he was there for hours. And when
Who did he golf with?
That day, he golfed with just some staffers and friends. The day before was with Senators Graham and Paul, and Dave Perdue was there as well. But when he came back to the White House that night on Sunday, the tweet had been out there for hours, and he came back to silence from Republicans. And he told people around him, look, no one's challenged me. I'm going to double down on this and triple down on this. That night he tweeted again. On Monday morning, today we've seen it in several tweets, and then at the White House itself, echoing in even harder language about these, they can leave if they don't love America. This is the play. The White House, this president wants this fight.
Aaron Blake.
Yeah, I think it's tempting to look at stuff like this and look for the strategy in it. I think in this case, this obviously fits the pattern of playing for the base. It obviously fits the pattern of the president never backing down or apologizing, even when people in his own party may have said that he went too far, which, by the way, in this case, of course, we haven't really seen that pushback. I think there is an argument to be made that this is not a great idea just from a strategic standpoint, setting aside moral considerations here. If you look at polling about how Americans feel about immigrants and what they bring to this country, even over the last 3-4 years since Donald Trump rolled down that golden elevator in Trump Tower, people have actually gotten more accepting of immigrants, more believing that they bring something to this country, that they're helping us more than they're hurting us. And I looked at these numbers today, and actually, even if you look at numbers within the Republican Party, there has not been a move towards the president and towards Tucker Carlson in this question. It has been static if it hasn't gone in the opposite direction. So to the extent that this is a base play, it may animate some people who are out there. But as with these things, there is always the risk of the countervailing effect. Does it turn off people who maybe aren't quite on board with the president? Does it motivate those suburban swing voters that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, look, and to Aaron's point, I agree with that. And I've said this to Republican strategists and friends. If you're still fretting about the base, you're shaking in your boots. Isn't the base locked up with Gorsuch, with Kavanaugh, with the cuts. I mean, why is he so worried about the base?
So to piggyback on Erin's point, it's actually really fascinating, and we all move so quickly that it's hard to remember what happened yesterday, much less a couple of days ago. But in 2016, in the Republican nominating season, in every single state where they did exit polling, they asked the question, what do you do with the undocumented population? Would you prefer to see mass numbers deported, or would you prefer to see them put on a path to legal status, if not citizenship? In the 30-plus states where they did that exit polling, only 2 states did a majority of Republican primary voters say yes, mass deportation. The rest of these states, the other 33 or 34 of them, said no, path to citizenship, if not path to legalization.
I know what the whole thing is: pay a fine, get at the end of the line behind people looking for legal.
10, 12-year process.
So what were the 2 states that?
I believe, and don't hold me to this, I believe it was Alabama and Mississippi. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah,
I could be wrong on that. But to your question about the base, Nicole, you would appreciate this, having worked in the White House. It's so interesting because historically you see presidents attempting to have broad appeal, attempting to appeal to the many at the expense of the few.
Correct.
And President Trump basically does the opposite consistently with all his policy. It's engaging and appealing to the few at the expense of the broader section of the electorate.
Believing this is going to be, and the math may not back them up on this, but believing this is going to be a pure base election where it's about turning out more Trump voters, people who didn't come out last time, voters who haven't voted in a long time. That's the strategy here, and it's to thread the needle and just enough of those states, and we know what they are in Rust Belt and so on, to squeak out an electoral college victory, even if potentially they lose the popular vote by that much more this time around.
Well, and for Democrats, this is why it's really important to come up with a really comprehensive approach to immigration, so that you're actually appealing to some of those voters and these sort of narrow interests that come up in
the 90% of Republicans who are for a legal pathway to citizenship.
Exactly, and so I
can help them write that. Bush took a stab at it, and I think President Obama did too.
Well, and it's out there; it's been voted on, so it's not that complicated. And I think for Democrats to narrow in on that as opposed to these sort of really nuanced, is it this much border funding or that much border funding? And, who are you enforcing immigration policy on? And I think, the rally around not these 4 women, but the rally around this idea of a diverse nation is a real rallying cry for Democrats and for Americans. There are 22 million naturalized citizens in the country.
I agree with you, and I want to. I've got all this sound from Lindsey Graham that I was going to get to. I want to get to them. I want to get to their response, because I wonder if they do what you just described. I wonder if you described the Democratic Party as now being more united than it was, 70 hours ago. I found their messages really messages that should speak to the question I asked you. What do mamas tell their babies? They sound like the ones who understand the moment, maybe ahead of the mute and camera shy Republicans on Capitol Hill. Let me play their response. We don't have it yet, but so here. This is Congresswoman Presley. This is what racism looks like. We are what democracy looks like, and we're not going anywhere. Congresswoman Tlaib, I'm proud of my Palestinian roots, and a weak bully like you never wins. Congresswoman Omar, you are stoking white nationalism because you're angry that people like us are serving in Congress and fighting against your hate-filled agenda. AOC, Trump feels comfortable leading the GOP into outright racism, and that should concern all Americans. To a woman, I was going to say to a person, to a woman, each one of them took the message with the broadest appeal. This is what racism looks like. This is what America looks like. I will not be bullied because I'm female and not white. I mean, each one of them seemed to be the better version of themselves than when they're fighting amongst the Democratic caucus.
Well, and it's a unifying message for the Democratic caucus, but it's a unifying message for the country. And so if they can stick to that, we want them saying all those things.
I think that's right. I think the ideological battle that's happening within the Democratic Party is a healthy one. It's a diverse tent. You're going to have people who disagree. You're going to have never-Trumpers who are moving over. So you're going to have all kinds of arguments happening under that banner. So I think this is a good thing. I think the vision that these 4 amazing women are putting forward is a vision that is really good for the country. I'm worried, though. You guys know about this stuff more than I do. I'm just kind of up here in whatever era I'm in. What's the relationship between greed, selfishness, and racism? So oftentimes we would think that the person who's pulling back from the cultural stuff, right? I'm not that, but I like this tax cut. I'm not that, but I like deregulation. I'm not that, but I like these policies that are actually helping my small business. So you get this intersection of racism and greed and selfishness that he might be banking on, that you can go from the few to the many because you think some folks are going to double down on being selfish.
And I want you to answer that, but we asked the question about misogyny after Access Hollywood tape. Where is, and I was, loud and wrong. We will not elect somebody who is so flagrantly misogynist. And we did, maybe for the, what, do you have an answer?
It's so interesting. I spoke with Kellyanne Conway for this book, and she said something that really stuck in my mind. We were talking about Access Hollywood weekend. And she said, look, people can mock me to my grave for saying this, but I'm telling you, it is the truth. There is a difference for voters between what affects them and what offends them. And they are going to vote on what affects them 99.9% of the time. And I think she's right. I think she's right, and I think the president believes in that. But really, to put a bow on the point you were making a minute ago, Congresswoman, John Boehner, the former speaker, used to have this great quip he would use talking to his conference when they were always having this infighting. He would say, look, in politics, when your opponent is committing suicide, don't shoot him. And Donald Trump just gave the Democrats this incredible gift. They're coming off of this tumultuous week, and you have this incredible amount of internecine warfare on the Democratic side. And what does the president do but just hand them this rallying cry? It's incredibly mismessaged as a political matter.
Well, and in response to Eddie, 2018 was actually that response by the electorate. They said, we are going to vote for what affects us and what offends us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.